Hey everybody, same exact thing as last time, except I'm going to go negative against the STEM affirmative. So I'm going to pretend as though Aaron reads the 1AC. Aaron, if you want to go ahead and read it, that would be fine. I'll be happy to evaluate it, but I pretty much know how it plays out. So I'm going to go ahead and do the 1NC. After you read the 1AC, even after the debate that we're doing over food insecurity, if you want to go ahead and play this, Waleed, so you can prep a 2AC, that's fine. These are two arguments the two off-case arguments I'm going to read, you don't have answers to, which means you'll have to come up with something new to say. And then there's some case arguments as well. Okay, so the order is going to be two off-case arguments and a slew of case arguments that I'll put all on contention too. Okay? Is anybody not ready? The first off-case argument is a counterplan text. President Trump should immediately nominate and Congress should confirm to the Office of Science Advisor and Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, or the OSTP, a scientist with widely held and respected positions concerning climate change, science, and technology. Contention 1 is logistics. We will compete with the plan on the question of ordering. Our argument is that this position must be filled before the plan is implemented. Thus, any permutation either serves the immediacy of the plan or fails to solve. Additionally, the counterplan doesn't guarantee the passage of any education policy, which means it will avoid the disadvantage. Contention 2 is solvency. First, Trump should appoint a widely respected scientist to the OSTP, and that person should advise on standards independently of Trump, Goldman, and 17. The president should move swiftly to appoint a widely respected scientist to the position of science advisor and nominate the same person to be the director of the OSTP. Filling this position should be a top priority. He should work with Congress and agencies to reform and strengthen the Federal Scientific Advisory Committee system by inducting the OGE to provide clear guidelines for a conflict of interest on federal advisory committees, including concrete steps to ensure an appropriate criteria, such as party affiliation. Political opinions are never part of the process for selecting members of the Scientific Advisory Committee. And currently, there's no science advisor for Trump. This means all of the current decisions, including STEM education, will be made without knowledge about science, technology, or climate change. Even the plan mandates means that nothing happens well. The counterplan, however, solves this. Clark and 18. Trump has yet to name a science advisor. The lack of a permanent advisor has serious implications for incorporating science into policy decisions. Without direct access, he doesn't have the clout to do it. He can't write a memo to the president or get an appointment without collaboration from someone who has access to the president, who is particularly hard to influence. The absence of a science advisor means that nobody with direct access to the president who knows anything about science or technology as they affect the number of discussion policy issues. Such an advisor is also instrumental in STEM education issues. Our argument here is basically that the president should have an advisor that can advise them on things like STEM. This has to happen before the plan can happen, and would actually ultimately end up resulting in the plan, which would mean that the counterplan will solve the plan better. But the counterplan also avoids our second argument, which is a disadvantage, the movement's disadvantage. Subpoint A. A movement is now developing to stop school privatization. However, it could easily be diverted. Now is key. Strauss on May 30th. Americans know the market-based reform drained funds from public schools. Most oppose the policy. Opposition to market-based reform is growing stronger, but it needs to be transformed quickly into electoral activism. Donald Trump promised sweeping privatization policies for K-12 education, but so far his program has stalled in Congress. A draining resource from public schools has already undermined districts in the country, especially those serving low and minority students. Time is short for rescuing and improving public education. Destroying it will not require privatizing the entire system or anything near that. We are watching death by 1,000 cuts, and the link is the plan thwarts the movement. The federal government engagement in education directly stops risk-taking from educators and locks in the status quo. This is true even if there's broad consensus on the benefits of the plan. O'Day 13. On education system, federal intrusion, even during periods of relative political agreement, falls short in several key areas, relying on top-down mandates or threats that thwarted both individual and organizational learning needing for fundamental transformation. While threats usually diminish the risk-taking needed to solve persistent and systemic problems, impatience with mistakes and slow progress undermined attention to long-term capacity building, and policy rhetoric and action turn quickly to hard-edge accountability to force improvement. Research on both individual and organizational response to threat bind a consistent pattern of reliance to known practice and avoidance of risk. And subpoint C is that school privatization and choice perpetuate racial subordination for 3 reasons. 1, it informed cultural deficit model. 2, it presents unreasonable educational alternatives. And 3, it racializes the school experience. James in 14, choice masks racial subordination in the public education in the form of unreasonable educational alternatives. Educational policy problematically informed the cultural deficit model and negative racialized school experience. School choice forces parents and caregivers of colors to bear the burden of reform, thus shifting the responsibility from the state to the individual. When choice fails to improve the educational outcomes, ultimately the rhetoric of individualism, independence, independence and liberty that permeate school choice and distract stakeholders from addressing large social issues. Race, class, and identity will necessarily impede genuine choice in the education system and undermine the democratic values of citizenship and equality that should inform public education making. And D is the impact. Racial subordination is an inherent social evil that should be rejected no matter what, meaning in 2000. The struggle against racism is a struggle to be undertaken without concession. To give it a foothold means to diminish what is human. Racism illustrates the inevitable negativity of the entire human condition. One cannot found a moral order, let alone legislative order, on racism. The refusal of racism is the condition for all morality. If this is not accepted, then only destruction will be our lot. Let's go to contention 2. They say they solve climate change, but their impact for climate change is 100 years away. Prefer our impacts, they happen sooner. Ridley 15. There is a possibility that it is not dangerous. In the 1990s, the IPCC is predicting that if emissions rose in the usual way, then global average temperature would rise 0.3 degrees. Temperature have risen about 0.1 degree. The IPCC lowered its forecast, the warning of 0.1 degree per decade. In all scenario models are too sensitive. Doubling carbon dioxide levels should produce just over 1 degree. These feedback effects have been poorly estimated and almost certainly overestimated. The last IPCC report debunking many worries about tipping points, suddenly a methane release or a slowdown of Gulf streams are very unlikely. A collapse of the ice sheets are exceptionally unlikely. If climate change continues at the same rate, dangerous warming is about a century away, which means we've got 100 years to solve it. But the truth is that there's no spill up. There's no evidence that students learning about STEM now will solve climate change now. Parents, lawmakers, manufacturers, etc. would have to get on board. They won't have the education. Make them read evidence that says that the students who are learning about STEM now actually solve climate change. There's no reason that this would happen. And there's no STEM shortage. Actually, about 74% of those who graduate with STEM majors don't even work in the field. There's a huge surplus. Bureau of Labor Supply in 2015, Tinbaum opined that there's no general shortage of scientists and engineers. There's evidence of suggesting surpluses. Similarly, Lowell and Saltzman pointed to the disproportionate percentage of the bachelor's degree STEM holders not employed in STEM occupations. For every 2 students graduating within the U.S. STEM degree, only 1 is employed in the STEM, and only 32% of the computer science graduates are not employed in information technology. The U.S. Census Bureau reported that 74% of those who have a bachelor's degree in STEM majors are not employed in STEM occupations, which means there's no STEM shortage, which means there's no reason there's not transnational cooperation now. And focusing on STEM erects additional educational barriers. This derails academic success and prevents solvency of the affirmative harms, Murowski says in 2016. Hacker characterized the prevailing STEM boom as a major methodology of our time. Rigid math standards erect a barrier to entering professions like medicine. There's nothing more cruel than weed-out mechanisms. Imposing the mathematics of college readiness on everyone will derail the academic careers of huge pools of young people. American educational highways littered with dropouts at every mile, a human roadkill that doesn't have to happen. Our argument here is basically that if you force STEM on people, that it actually causes there to be new barriers, which means that people don't graduate, which means that they don't advance and they don't take the careers that they're needing to be able to do. This happens with the affirmative plan, it doesn't happen with the counter plan, and it doesn't happen with the disadvantage that in the current system is happening. And my final argument is a turn. STEM trades off with humanities, things like government and art classes. Humanities are actually key to solve conflict, though. Martinez Fernandez in 2012, investments in STEM education usually come at the expense of humanities. Systemic funding of education in fields such as history can have damaging repercussions. Damages include an uninformed citizenry and a concomitant erosion of democracy, a workforce unable to collaborate with different cultures in a globalized world. This threatens economic competitiveness. Genetics develop high-yielding crops but have yet to be able to eradicate famine. Hunger is on the rise. Defense industry create futuristic weapons, but it cannot guarantee the preservation of peace. Scientists cannot solve the world's problems. We need humanists to warn us about looming dangers of increasingly technocratic, market-driven authoritarian systems. Our argument is really clear here, that you have to have people who have those developmental skills, not just scientists, mathematics, technology, and engineering. The only way to solve that is with the counterplan. Vote negative. Yeah, that's time. So I'm going to go ahead and upload both of these. I would suggest make sure that you do the food video first. Go ahead and do the 2NR for that. Then go ahead and do the 2AC for this. Once you get either or both up, I'll be happy to do the 2AR. Honestly, let me just say as a means of information, I'm really excited about how you all are debating. Hopefully the volume on these is sufficient that you can hear me. If you have any questions, send me an email and I'll be happy to send you the documents that I used. Okay, thanks.